and introduce our next speaker, who is Matt Horsnell, and he's going to be speaking on living with narcolepsy, social support and counselling, navigating narcolepsy and mental health comorbidities. For those of you that do not know Matt Horsnell, he is a father of 3 and he lives with type 1 narcolepsy. That's narcolepsy with cataplexy. He serves as a facilitator for Wake Up Narcolepsy's online small group. He runs actually 2 a week. And Matt's advocacy focuses on narcolepsy and mental health awareness and legislative efforts. Matt is a Rising Voices of Narcolepsy graduate, a national lead, sleep state champion for Project Sleep. He is a spokesperson for No Narcolepsy and a blog writer for Health Union Sleep Disorders. Matt also serves as a co-host for NChat on Twitter. Matt also has the longest hashtag in narcolepsy. I'm going to see if I can say this now. It's hashtag world's strongest person having narcolepsy with cataplexy. I think that's on Instagram. And his mum believes he's the most handsome bearded person living with narcolepsy. Matt has also been Heather's fiance since actually a couple of months ago, I think. So Matt, welcome. Thank you for being here today, for sharing your journey and all that you do right across the sleep space in terms of advocacy and support. And I'm going to hand over to you now, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. First, just want to say, appreciate this opportunity. It's great. It was so amazing watching Kara do her presentation, and it was just really touching having seen her story grow. I'm a little bit upset with her because she really stole a lot of great talking points. No, actually, she did fantastic. I'm just appreciative to be here. And just wanted to say that, you know, as Claire was saying, I am a narcolepsy advocate. I do facilitate groups. I'm also a Rising Voices of Narcolepsy speaker. All of these opportunities are ones that are available really for anybody to participate in. So we're going to talk a little bit today about basically navigating my life with narcolepsy and mental health and just some approaches I've taken. So if you can go to the next slide. Okay, so first I want to say that this presentation wouldn't be possible without the support of my family. And as it says, they're brought to you by the letter N. That's a hat tip to Sesame Street. But also just wanted to point out that my mom, my brother, my son, my daughters, they've all been so critical. And just recently I've had a chance to get engaged to, her name's Heather. She's actually a licensed counselor and therapist, and she's actually helped encourage me and motivate me along my journey as well. And I couldn't be here without the support of all of those folks. And I wanted to add this at the beginning because I tried it at the end and I just cried too much. So that's also Maddie and Gracie. Those are my 2 support pooches. So next slide, please. One of the reasons I started to tell my story is that I kind of wanted to take ownership of my life with narcolepsy. For so many years, I viewed narcolepsy as this hurdle that I needed to overcome, as this, weakness. It caused muscular weakness. It was also a weakness in my social life. And I decided that I needed to turn that on its head and start to let narcolepsy kind of work for me. And so that's when I woke up and I just started that every day, I'm going to start my day diligently and with purpose, and I'm going to be the author of my own story. I'm going to tell my story with narcolepsy instead of having narcolepsy tell my story. So next slide, please. During my diagnosis process, I learned a lot of lessons about the healthcare system, and I try to focus on the positive ones. What I learned that one thing that's really important to me is that I need to find a doctor and a healthcare team that treats me as a person first and then a patient second. So if I walk in and we're just talking about symptoms, we're not talking about what's going on in my life tangentially, whether it be as a dad, just personal life with occupation, all of these play into the impact of the symptoms on my life. And so if I'm very blessed to find a sleep physician who sees me as a person. We talk about who I am outside of narcolepsy, and then how that interacts with me as a person with narcolepsy. And that was critical in terms of going down the right path and finding, building a relationship that can benefit me. I looked for somebody who was board certified through the ASM. I happened to live in an area where there was multiple options for that. And one of the big questions I had is, do they treat other people with narcolepsy? And, that was really key for me in terms of, do they have that established relationship? I had a tough time early on communicating with doctors. They would say, how are you doing? And my answer would be fine. Even to this day, that's kind of my first knee-jerk response to when a doctor's asked me how I'm doing. And so it's been really important to find somebody who can ask me the right questions, can get me to open up a little bit. And I'll talk a little bit more about how I do that here later in the presentation. So next slide, please. I had to learn how to advocate. I was blessed with a lot of, skills naturally that kind of translated well to that. That's a shout out to my mom for teaching me along the road. But I had to learn how to process that and turn that into a successful relationship with my medical care team. So what I like to do is I like to document my symptoms. So throughout my time in between appointments, if I have a really bad day with EDS, excessive daytime sleepiness, I'm writing that down. If I had a horrible sleep paralysis episode, with or without the hypnagogic or hypnopompic hallucinations, I'm writing that down. And that way, when I go to the doctor's office, I can hand her these notes. Those then get put into my file. And it's a great talking point list for my doctor and I to start exchanging ideas about if we do need to make changes medication wise, what are some things that have been happening that might have triggered that. And one thing that's helped me is it just helps me organize my thoughts. And going through this is a process. It's a grieving process. You get told the diagnosis, and it's, now what? My thought was, oh, life is going to be so much better. It'll be back to the way it was before. And then I realized I don't even know what that life looked like before. It's been so long since I've been living sleepy. What does that look like? And so I had to go through a grieving process, and that's something that groups have been really helpful with. When I've talked with my doctor, it was important that I understand what this diagnostic model looked like. So I asked questions about the sleep test, the overnight test of polysomnography, and then the multi-sleep latency test that takes place the next day. I was very active. I actually still have printouts from that study that I requested. They're just squiggly lines on paper, or at least they were at first. And then I've gone back and kind of learned a little bit about what they're looking for during that diagnostic process. Also, it's important that as a person with narcolepsy, you understand what medication options are available. It's very helpful for you when you go into your appointment to make sure that you're asking questions. That some of these medication options are new. Not every doctor is seeing multiple patients with narcolepsy. And so when you can come to them with information and say, hey, tell me a little bit about this, it's a great way for them to know that you're educated on what's going on, and then that you are willing to look at some different treatment options. Part of my biggest struggle was that, symptom onset was at age 12. It's as far back as I can trace it, but my diagnosis wasn't until I was 25. Along that way, I experienced 5 or 6 misdiagnoses. And so it's really critical for you to kind of go back through, work with your different physicians and figure out what you are actually dealing with. Narcolepsy can kind of be the climate that you live in, but there are multiple weather fronts that come in and can impact your life with narcolepsy. So next slide, please. So some common misdiagnoses, these are some that I've experienced, others that I've heard about in groups quite a bit. Major depressive disorder, that was a huge one for me. I didn't know how to communicate to the doctor that my sleepiness was causing my depression and not that my depression was causing the sleepiness. What I found out along the way is that these are 2 different conditions that I deal with. And so I do have depression as well, and that impacts my sleepiness. But that's not kind of the key to my treatment. Along the way, but it was mentioned that they were looking at some bipolar options for me. That was again as a result of them not understanding the impact of sleep in the direction there. I believe Kara was talking a little bit about epilepsy. That gets the cataplexy episodes can often be misinterpreted as epilepsy seizure. Even some of the sleep attacks can mimic that. Schizophrenia, I've heard of this one because of the hallucinations that people experience. And so it's important for you, the doctor, to understand it's the hallucinations from the narcolepsy that are causing these, visual, auditory, and tactile issues that you experience. Low iron is another area that I've heard a lot of people talking about. It's actually important for restless legs that you do have appropriate iron levels. And so I'm not saying that that's not a helpful option, but it wasn't what was causing my issues. Anxiety disorders can result when you're that sleepy. It's tough to process information, and so you can get bombarded with different, overwhelming stimulus, and then you can have anxious responses to that. Attention deficit disorder and ADHD are other diagnoses that I received because I was having trouble concentrating. The trouble with concentration was actually a result of the sleepiness. And so it took a while to figure out. It also led to me being undertreated with some medications along the way, and kind of masked, what the underlying narcolepsy diagnosis was, because there was some treatment, it just wasn't sufficient. Somatic symptom disorder is another condition that I've heard about, where doctors see somebody who has lived with, possibly manifesting some of these issues. Stress can cause your body to respond in physiological ways, and you're definitely experiencing those symptoms, but it's actually the stress and it's a psychiatric condition that's causing that. And so it's important to understand what you do have and then what you don't have. So next slide, please. So some different treatments, medication. People with narcolepsy have a deficiency, especially type 1, a deficiency in hypocretin. They're developing medications, as we've discussed this weekend, to look at that, but we have to treat the symptoms of sleepiness and then the disrupted nighttime sleep. So making sure that you have the right medication and treatment protocol is really critical. For me, naps are essential. If I don't take naps throughout the day, I struggle. I've have two different kinds of naps. I have, anticipated naps, and so scheduled naps, or I also have what I call rescue naps. And so these are naps that I take when the sleepiness gets out of hand, and I'm just basically starting to go downhill. I'm experiencing profound brain fog. So I take a 15 to 20 minute nap at those times. I will also, depending on my structured day with my kids, will sometimes take an hour and a half nap after I get my son to school in the morning. Social support is an under-discussed area on treatment with narcolepsy. It's been essential for me. It's as important as medicine. These small groups that I facilitate and that I attend, I can't make it through my life with narcolepsy without having the support of my peers. I cannot understate the importance that it's had on my life. And I can name 24 other folks who would say the same thing. So don't hesitate to experiment and try some of these small groups that are available, because I think what you'll find is that they change your life. Counseling has been essential. Kara alluded to that a little bit in her presentation, that she was thinking about going this route. And I'm going to encourage her, and I'm going to encourage all of you. Don't hesitate to seek out professional help for what's going on. As a guy living with narcolepsy and living with mental health issues, there's a stigma. Counseling would make me weak. No, actually, counseling makes me strong. It's what gives me the tools that I need to go ahead and tackle the challenges of life. In small groups, we can discuss some of the issues you're developing and dealing with, but counseling is where you can really uncover some of the trauma. You can work on making some changes in behavior and thoughts, how you're feeling, and really just dig deep. It can be a little bit challenging right after a session. I usually have to schedule a nap shortly thereafter to kind of calm myself down. The discussing of emotional aspects of life can really overwhelm me. And so having a safe place to take a nap afterwards has been really helpful. I choose exercise, as I was jokingly put in my bio, I call myself the world's strongest person having narcolepsy with cataplexy. I do feel that way most days. But it's about the mental and physical toughness that it takes to wake up and work out every day. And so anybody can claim that title. If you decide to wake up and you work out on that given day, you deserve that title because you're taking an extra step, you're investing in yourself. And even when you're experiencing, exhaustion, like you haven't slept for 48 to 72 hours, you're going, I'm going to do this. I'm going to invest in myself. I'm going to lift. And I can tell you that that's had a huge impact on how I look at myself in the mirror and also how my symptoms have responded. Immediately, like counseling after a workout, I can sometimes be tired, but over the course of the week, the benefits of energy level have been profound. Nutrition is another area. And there's so many different nutrition options, and they can also be related to some of the comorbidities that you might be dealing with. I don't want to delve too much into that. It's kind of outside the scope of this conversation, but I couldn't not mention those two components. And that's not to say that your symptoms are going to go away. That's just not going to be the case. But you can experience some profound relief along the way with exercise and nutrition. Relaxation, mindfulness, and breathing. One issue that I have, I also live with sleep apnea, and it's really tough for me to take naps away from home because of the interrupted breathing and that I experience as a result of sleep apnea. So by doing some breathing exercises, it allows me to get calm, and also I feel myself jumping into REM. I actually feel my eyes start to flutter, and I might be hearing everything that's going on around me, but I'm getting the benefits of getting through that REM deficit. Then I use what's called an 8-8-4 technique. There's so many different techniques, so you may want to experiment and find the right one for you. So it's 8 seconds in, hold for 8 seconds, and then breathe out for 4. And I just repeat that over and over again, and it just helps lower, my blood pressure. It helps me calm down. It helps me to kind of get in the state that I need to work through whatever's going on. And again, relaxation and mindfulness are two areas that are also really important, and you can talk about those in counseling or even in small groups. I use arts and crafts. I wrote an article recently about the increase in creativity in people with narcolepsy, and as I've gone along and met more and more people in this community, I found that there's poets. There's Kara, who does spoken poetry. If you haven't checked out her 7 syllables YouTube video, please do, because you will cry. It will be an amazing, profound experience. But when you connect with your artistic side, I don't have to use a lot of spoons to sit down and glue rocks together. That's what I do. It's rocks and fossils that I collect with my son, with my fiance Heather, with my daughters, and then I take those and I glue them together in different anthropomorphic figures. That's actually Rock Pablo. He lives in astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson's office, his Star Talk Radio office. I sent that to him as a hat tip for his science communication work that he does. The eyeballs there are actually prianoids, and they're over 350 to 400 million years old. From Tennessee was an ocean during the Devonian period, but I don't want to talk about that too much because that's nerding out a little bit more than I need to. So next slide, please. So treatments. There's so many different treatment options through counseling that you can explore, and so this would be something to talk to your doctor or your counselor about. And the 3 that I've had experience with are the ones I'm going to choose to talk about. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a key component to my counseling. EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a trauma and OCD treatment option. And then what's called Brainspotting is another area that's been really helpful in working through some of those. So next slide. Okay, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT therapy, it looks at your thoughts and behaviors, and then how it all impacts with your emotions. And so, as you see there in the slide, it just kind of is a circle. It revolves around itself. And when you start to look at how you can change and develop better strategies to deal with those, that's what you're doing in your talk therapy. I want to say I've got a great therapist that I see every 2 weeks. If I need to see her, I'm seeing her every week. She'll let me know. She also has been great about scheduling appointments when I'm at my best. And so for me, actually about this time, 1 o'clock Eastern is when mentally I'm processing on as many cylinders as I can. And so she's been great about scheduling an appointment and reserving a time for that. And so I want to give a hat tip to her and say thank you for working with me there. She's done phenomenal work helping me deal with some recent personal struggles. This counseling helps me get through the challenges that I face in life in a little more in depth than what I can do in my small group setting. Dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT, is a subcategory, and really it's about changing your negative thinking patterns in a way that can impact your behavior choices. So next slide. EMDR is a therapy type that a lot of people have shown a lot of positive results with. I'm one of those. It really helped me work through some really difficult trauma experiences. In 2010, my family and I lost everything in the Nashville floods. That left a huge wound on me psychologically, and it was something I had to work through. It's a pretty in-depth therapy. It was about 3 years actually after my diagnosis with narcolepsy, and that moment could have completely thrown me down. It did for a while, but through the help of EMDR training, I was able to work through some of that. And it involves what's called bilateral stimulation. So left, right, left, right. A lot of times you'll see people, in examples, they'll move a finger across and your eye tracks that. You can also have an auditory signal, so like a pulse from one ear to the other, and then tactile stimulation, which can involve some paddles that send like just a low current. It's not a shock, but back and forth from right to left side. And something about that process, and they haven't quite uncovered how it opens up the trauma response and those memories, but it allows you to really dig deep and process what's going on there. And so you can look at the trauma in a safe environment. I was doing like the booger cries during a lot of it, just tears flowing, talking about how this impacted me, the sights, the smells, the sensations that I experienced during some of that. It was just invaluable. A couple years later, I found my friend deceased in his home. It was not a pleasant experience, as you might imagine. And so I needed some EMDR therapy to work through that as well. And so it's something I just encourage you to talk to your counselor about as a way to, if you have some trauma. Most people have some trauma that they're dealing with, and it's hard to get through life without experiencing it. And this allows you to go through that. The next slide, please. Brainspotting is one that I don't have as much experience on, but it's a subcategory, or it's kind of branched off of EMDR, and it allows you to locate and process trauma in the subcortical brain. So that's the part there that's highlighted, and it uses eye position and some stimulation to help identify, process, and release the trauma. So it allows you to go in, find where that trauma it kind of exists in your brain, get it out of your system, and then you store kind of the memories, but you've taken away some of that emotional trigger that takes place. The triggers that resulted from trauma were some of the most profound impacts on living with narcolepsy. So it triggered my symptoms in ways that it's really hard to even articulate. And so looking at some ways to work through that was important for me along my journey. Next slide, please. Without a doubt, my go-to method for working through difficulties in life has been Wake Up Narcolepsy small groups. Wednesday night, I help co-facilitate. Saturday, there's actually a group that's about to start here in a few minutes. It's a great way to connect and relate to other people with narcolepsy. You get to meet people who have decades of experience. There's been some octogenarians in the group. We also get to meet with people who have just been diagnosed. Like 2 days ago, I just got diagnosed. And to see people at the different stages in their journey as they come back to group, as they share, as they go from being more listeners to being more sharers is, I don't know if there's been a more touching experience in my narcolepsy advocacy than watching the growth of my peers. And they come back, they're having a rough day some days they're having a great day. So we get to share their grief and also share their successes, and it's truly beautiful. And those relationships aren't just limited to those groups. There's some little Instagram groups that we have set up that allow us to communicate on a daily basis. The great thing about these groups is that they are completely anonymous. And so I've asked Kara if I can say that she's in the groups, and she said it's okay. I try not to mention other people in the groups in any social media context or in any way that might show that they attended unless I have their permission. That's a big part of it. And so what's said in groups stays in groups. So you can go there if you're having, a really rough time. If there's something that's kind of emotional or you're dealing with some embarrassment or shame, you can talk about it. It's a safe place. There's no judgment involved. If you're worried about, I don't want my work to find out, well, this is a great way to go. And you share in these groups, or everything is kept there. So don't hesitate. There's also going to be some new groups coming soon. I think Claire's talked a little bit about that. Some great groups that are going to help specialize in different areas and help us meet the needs of the community. Really, really excited to see how those grow. And these groups have grown over time. It started off, it was myself, Diana, and one other fella, and that was how it was for a couple of weeks. And then now we have groups where there's 25 people. We're trying to work on finding ways to keep those numbers in the 20 range, so everybody has a chance to share. But it's truly beautiful, and it's a sign of the success of the programs. And I do want to credit Wake Up Narcolepsy for identifying this need early on, for Claire for championing this process. The infrastructure was in place when COVID hit. Wake Up Narcolepsy became, the go-to resource for support in this community. And it was because of, identifying the leadership on both a board and executive level. So I just can't speak highly enough of the efforts that they put into that. So next slide, please. All right, tools. So for tools, we have the support groups we talked about, the counseling. I call it the familial and friend support. That's a family of choice and family of origin support that I choose to adopt. The webinars, personal stories. So your story and then others, you can find so much information on YouTube videos. You can find some great stories through No Narcolepsy. You can find some great stories through Rising Voices of Narcolepsy. And what I like to use with these is great tools for me to share life with narcolepsy with my friends and family. They don't always hear the message when I speak, but when they hear it from someone else's voice, my mom has read both Julie's Wide Awake and Dreaming and also Claire's Waking Matilda, and she learned invaluable stuff. It's stuff that I may have talked about, may not have emphasized in a way that she can understand it. And there's something about the power of personal stories and vignettes that really help connect the message. Statistics can tell part of the story, but the first person narratives are what really send advocacy and awareness to the next level. Social media is a great choice for me. I go back and forth. I was posting every day. I don't post every day now, but it's a way for me to tell my story and to communicate about what's going on in life. I try to share the ups and the downs. If you look at my Instagram profile, you'll see more muscle selfies than I really should ever have taken. But it was my way of flexing through some tough moments in life, and it was showing, hey, I did this, and this is how, this is what I worked through today. So there's some toolkits that are available on the different nonprofit websites. There's one that I helped participate with in a Nerd Alert for Project Sleep. There's toolkits available on the different sites that just help you find, if you're having an issue in one area, you can find some support there. Blogs, Health Union, Narcolepsy, and Sleep Disorders is a website that I write for. And I know a number of people who also write articles here, and there's so much wisdom in this community. And with the advent of the internet and social media, it's now available to you right at your fingertips. And so it's a great way to connect and to learn more about living with narcolepsy. Next slide. The climate of narcolepsy. So I alluded to this earlier. People with narcolepsy live in a storm of sleepiness, and it's also impacted so much by different weather patterns, as I call it. So different influences along the way. So next slide. So sleep weather patterns for me, I have sleep apnea, I have restless legs, I have periodic limb movement. Circadian rhythm disorders are an area that's really exploded in research here as well. Idiopathic hypersomnia is another diagnosis that a lot of people have been beginning to experience. All of these impact sleep. And so there's an overlap for me in how sleepiness is being manifested. And so figuring out what you have in addition to narcolepsy as far as sleep disorders has been really critical. Next step, next slide. I call these mental health fronts. So these are areas, either conditions or situations that have impacted my life with narcolepsy profoundly. I kind of alluded to the grief. In group, we talk about the Kubler-Ross grief cycle. So there's 5 stages of grief that are kind of non-linear that you go through to get to acceptance. They recently added a 6th step, which is called finding meaning. And that's been really critical for me to look, I went through this diagnostic process. I go through it every day. Sometimes I get thrown back into depression. Sometimes I'm back in denial or bargaining, but ultimately I'm working towards acceptance and the finding meaning. And by choosing to have narcolepsy work for me, that's been key for me. Depression is one that I deal with every day. Anxiety has been another area that's impacted me tremendously in my symptoms. The post-traumatic stress that I alluded to. Also, if you spend more than about 5 minutes with me, you'll know that I have some obsessive compulsive tendencies, and also the different spectrum disorders. And so I am on the spectrum. It might be the first time I've publicly acknowledged that, but it can impact my thinking and how I process and deal socially. So I thought it was important, as I'm reducing stigma in one area, to talk about it in others. I've also have type 2 diabetes. And so learning to manage my blood sugar. Right now, my average is 104, and I will flex that because that's been a huge struggle for me. So learning to understand how my ups and downs and my sugars impacted my sleepiness was huge. And also, I'm about to be 40, and in my early to mid 30s, I realized after some tests that I had some low testosterone issues. At first it was a little bit embarrassment associated with that, but it's something that can be treated. And it's something that's really important to talk about with your doctor so you understand how all of these come into play. All of these impacted my sleepiness. And if one of these areas gets off, that climate shifts and it's going to be an ice age. So next slide, please. Some hurdles. For me, one of the biggest hurdles has been hubris. So my own self-importance and belief that I don't need help from others has really kicked me in the pants and thrown me to the ground. Learning to talk about it, I can learn something from every person in the group, whether they just got diagnosed yesterday or they've been living with this for 6 decades. I can learn something from them. And so understanding that about myself has been helpful. Medication interactions. So certain medications can cause sleepiness. It's important to understand and have open communication with your doctor to figure out those right approach for you. I call it myopic approaches. And so if you have a doctor, or if it's within yourself and you're going, I just need to treat the sleepiness during the day, well, you're limiting a whole area of medicine on helping you find nighttime sleep interventions. And so if you focus on one, you're not going to be getting the full benefits of the medication. This is if there's ever a good time to live with narcolepsy, we're kind of in that era right now in terms of medication development. And so don't hesitate to have open communication with your doctor about adding a new medication or tweaking if you're at that point in your life, and if you want to try some new options. Toxic relationships and negativity. I don't want to overshare here on this, but I can tell you that, for me, I have to surround myself with positive people. My kids, my mom, my brother, my fiance, Heather, they support me in ways. It's all positive. And that's not to mean they don't call me out when I need to be called out, but the day-to-day message is positive. It's, reinforcing. And when you surround yourself in negativity and in toxic relationships, I can tell you that was the biggest hurdle and the biggest challenge that I had living through this. And I will say it almost killed me, being stuck in a relationship that was unhealthy. I didn't have the oomph, the ability to get up, the ability to fight, because there was this inner critic that was feeding me these messages. Some of it was outside messages, some of it was internal, but it was just this negative thought pattern. And so breaking myself out of that cycle, it was my responsibility to make changes. Learning to do that has been essential. Also, we've all seen them. There's cures that come about. on the whether it be on Facebook or the doctor who's advertising a cure for a condition you don't have, on Instagram. Just put all of those aside. There are ways to improve your life. There's no one size fits all fix. I can't drink a juice and feel better. And in my narcolepsy, it's a neurological condition. It's one that as of now I'm going to have for the rest of my life. And so I have to understand there's ways to improve life, but there's not a way to cure it. Doing the right yoga is not going to give me where I need to be. Now, yoga is actually a great exercise treatment, but it's not going to solve my issue. So next slide. I couldn't end this conversation without talking about the dangers of comparing yourself, both people with narcolepsy and people without narcolepsy. We live on, I call it the symptom severity spectrum. And so there are people who are either going through a tough time in life or who just have more severe symptoms than others. And so it's not fair for me to compare myself to them. It's not fair to them to compare them to me. We all live with our own challenges, our own hurdles. I talked a little bit about some of my mental health struggles that I deal with. I have to make sure that I'm being the best me I can be and not worry about trying to keep up with somebody with narcolepsy who's an MD or somebody who's a lawyer. They're all accomplishing great things, but that doesn't mean I can't also accomplish greatness, whether it be as a dad, whether it be as a volunteer. There's ways that I can succeed, and it's trying to find how to have those skills blossom takes time. And like I said, you're a human being, not a human doing. So make sure that you're not trying to define yourself by what you do. There's people with narcolepsy who are making a profound impact on this community who are living right now on disability. All right, they're not defined by what they do. They don't put limits on on what they're doing. They're going out and they're changing the world. Their story, and then one day at a time they're making changes. And so try not to get caught up in finding an occupation that will solve all your problems, because you're just going to be chasing your tail. But definitely pursue options that allow your greatness to show. And so next slide. So I just want to give a thank you, a big shout out to Claire, to Lindsay, to Elizabeth, who have helped put this together and who I've loved working alongside. My kids, I love you guys, and I'm not going to over embarrass you. I do hope one day that you watch this, but I've got 2 teenage daughters and an 8-year-old son, and they were my reason for getting up for so many years. When I did want to get up for myself, I knew I had to get up for them. My partner, Heather, she has been a phenomenal supporter. She's my best friend. She's the person I go to when life gets hard. Again, my family of origin, my mom, my dad, my brother, my aunts and uncles, cousins, they've all been helpful along my journey. My family of choice, which is my people in the community that I've met alongside the Wake Up Narcolepsy group members, my co-advocates, fellow rising voice of narcolepsy graduates, no narcolepsy support. The list goes on and on, but it's all about making sure I'm surrounding myself with positive people. So thank you guys just for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Matt. That was incredible. I have heard your story a few times, but I always learn so much and come away so inspired. So where can people find you, real quick, before we get into the questions?
Yeah.
Where can they find you online is what I mean by that.
Yeah, online. My Twitter is at Matt Horsnell. I talk a little bit about life in general there. I do focus, that's where I do some narcolepsy in chat. My Instagram handle is at M Horsnell. That's HORSNELL. And that's where you can see my day-to-day updates. If you look back, you'll see a whole lot of pictures of me lifting heavy things. That's my outlet. And I'm also on Facebook as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's if you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A. You have a lot of amazing responses in the chat, Matt, which I'll let you pick up on afterwards. Thank you. I think there's a general sense of you breaking down stigma, going into speaking about issues that haven't been covered but are constant themes in the community for people with narcolepsy. So I do want to thank you for being vulnerable and honest and inspiring. And I think you'll see that reflected in the comments. But a couple of questions, I think we have some time. First question, can EMDR that you spoke about be used for trauma associated with hypnagogic hallucinations?
From my understanding, yes, because that memory and trauma is stored in the brain. And so what you're doing with EMDR is you're uncovering those memories and experiences, you're feeling them, and then you're kind of restoring them as just factual accounts. So I woke up one day and I had, a horrible nightmare. This is what happened, but you get the emotion out of it.
Thank you. Okay. Next question. Thanks, Matt. Do you have any comments or suggestions for teen boys and a parent of a teen boy to better navigate narcolepsy who may be less likely to ask for help or seek social support?
That's a great question. And what my advice would be is for you to come and join one of our groups that we have. Those groups are available for parents as well as people with narcolepsy. They're available for partners and support members. And it's a great way to connect and understand how life is impacting them. As far as for a teen boy who's not willing to seek social support, that sounds a lot like a lot of teen boys. I'm not saying that it's not more extreme than the other, but I was definitely not inclined to seek help until I was 16 or 17 before I started looking for counseling and some outside direction. And so continuing to support, plant seeds. When they get to 16, they can start making their own choices on mental health treatment. That's a great way. They can then be empowered to make choices for themselves. And so giving them opportunities, making sure that they know, also, connecting, having sit down and share what you learned with them can be a helpful way. And, there's some different camps, the Wake Up Narcolepsy camp is an option. There's another organization, Faces of Narcolepsy, that does camps as well. So there's different ways to get involved. And, giving them exposure. There's also some conferences that you can go to as a family that I know a lot of families have benefited from. So learning how to help yourself. There's some conversations, which is a Wake Up Narcolepsy support that Clear helps direct. It's a great way for parents to come together and really figure out how to best support your kids and just love them. That's the only thing that I try to do every day, to the best of my ability. And just know that part of that is just going through the process of grief.
Thank you. And also we are launching a teenage support group, which we've been trying to get off the ground for a long time. It's actually quite complicated because of the legal side, but I think we've figured that out. So that will be early June. We've identified a facilitator, a young woman, actually a graduate of one of your groups. And this is one of the really interesting things for me on sort of the back end is seeing, people have attended support groups for months, sometimes longer, consistently. And, there's been this season of growth, and then they've kind of become advocates and sometimes group facilitators, and got engaged with us as an organization in terms of fundraising, raising awareness, volunteering, and so on and so forth. So the groups are quite specific, but we do have lots of opportunities for people to engage with us in terms of being a volunteer, and I'd love to hear from you. You can get hold of me at info@wakeupnarcolepsy.org, or my email, which is on the website. I think, Matt, we might be out of time, which is a great shame. So I did want to speak to you about spoon theory, but because I know you mentioned that, and perhaps another time or another forum we can even take up some of these questions, because you have a lot of comments. I'm not surprised. Thank you so much, Matt. And also quickly, is there a group this afternoon? Because people are asking, is your group running?
Yes, my group's running. I have an accomplished person who's actually going to be leading one of the other groups is taking over. And so if you wanted to check into that, definitely feel free to. It is up and running and going.
Okay, thank you. I'll let you get to that. Thank you again for all that you do for us as an organization and for the community, both sort of on a really large scale, but I know that you also work very much with individuals. So thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you, and for just being a motivation and inspiration. It's so appreciated.